Well, hello, everybody. This is Nahid. We are working in our boundaries boot camp on not only setting boundaries, but holding others accountable and prepping sentences for various different situations. And what I wanted to do is give those of you who missed the class a little bit of an overview on what we've been doing. And this is kind of a boring presentation in that it doesn't have a lot of pretty pictures, but it has a lot of text. So what you might want to do is print screens for yourselves and pause the video as you go through, and that'll give you a little bit of a worksheet. And I might make a handout out of this as well for you. So the first thing that I think is really important is this flow chart. One of the things that we talked about today in class is that the two things that make it really difficult to have these conversations successfully, and they happen to be the pitfalls that everybody falls into no matter how hard they try. Number one, getting confused about what your rules are and losing that clarity, especially in the moment when things are starting to happen that you don't want to be happening, and you're thinking, okay, I should be setting a boundary right now, but you're not really sure what to say or how to say it. And so the moment feels lost to you. But the other thing that we talked about that's really important is that it's actually not anywhere near as effective to talk to somebody when you're triggered. Because when you're feeling triggered, when you're feeling anything negative, frustration, anger, even just a tiny bit of hurt, it's going to come through in your energy, and it's going to come through as judgment, negative judgment towards the other person. They are going to feel attacked or judged no matter how well you think you're hiding the fact that you're triggered. So it's actually not a great idea for you to address an issue when you're feeling any negative emotions at all. And I think the reason people get in this trap is because they tend not to want to have these kinds of conversations when things are going well and they're feeling great. So they use that negative energy when they are triggered to finally talk about things that have really been building up for them. And that actually works against you. So you have to be prepared to have these conversations when you're calm and when you're feeling good. And with the tools that we have, you're going to be able to have good conversations. They're not going to start something spiraled. It might take a little bit of practice, but if you don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to have perfect conversations in the beginning and you take it in baby steps, then you'll be able to do this always during your positive moments. And that's where you're going to have the best chance of changing behavior. So if you look at this flow chart, what you're going to see is that, your two inflection points here where you're going to have the most power when you have conversations is this if yes, the positive reinforcement box, which means when they're actually not engaging in the behavior that is negative, when you're actually in a good part of your relationship, when things are going well and you're calm. And during those parts, you want to do the two things, and I've talked about this in prior videos, so I'm not going to go into it now, but active trust building, which basically means continuing to work on building your relationship and getting to know each other better, and positive reinforcement, which is every time you notice them doing the behaviors that you want them to do more of, you notice it and appreciate it. And you may even add the impact of the relationship. So I noticed that you jumped in and washed the dishes today. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate it. It makes such a difference to me that I don't have to worry about it and I can just go up and relax. And it matters to me. So it doesn't have to be gushy or overdone, but just those three things. I noticed, I appreciated, and this is the positive impact it's having. And if you do that enough just by itself, it can modify someone's behavior. So they're doing more and more of all the things that you're appreciating. We actually talked about this in class. So especially in women and men relationships, this works really well on men because men respond way better to appreciation than to criticism. So that with women relationships, women are a little bit more interested in the relationship and they're very invested in liking each other. So women are a little bit more responsive to conversations about when things go wrong and a little bit more committed to not repeating behaviors that didn't have a good effect. But men tend to get a little bit more defensive. Now, this is stereotypical, but it was something someone in class brought up today, and along with a great book recommendation, which we'll probably have somebody post in Slack. Okay, so we've already said if the boundaries crossed and you're triggered in that moment, you should not feel pressure to deal with the behavior in any other way than protecting yourself by leaving the scene or putting yourself in a quiet bubble. Really trying to deflate the conversation is the best thing. So, if you can gracefully leave the room without it being a trigger for the other person, like they're trying to get something from you, like some engagement from you, and they'll take it as an insult if you leave, or you're in a car and you can't get out of the car without being dramatic, then it's probably better not to leave. But if you can leave, one great, powerful way to discourage negative behavior is when it begins to happen, you just slowly stop interacting with the person and slowly remove yourself from the situation. And so what ends up happening is they're losing something that matters to them in most cases is that there's that interaction with you. So since they're losing it, they just, even without realizing it, may cease to do those things. So for example, if you have someone who's a shouter or a swearer, and every time they shout and swear, suddenly you're gone, right? It doesn't have to be abrupt or dramatic. Then what might end up happening is they just kind of at a subconscious level stop doing that without even realizing that they're doing it. But if you're in the room, again, you want to turn your face away or just do something to calm yourself down, because calming yourself down is the most important thing in those situations. And then when you're calm, in addition to all the active trust building and the positive reinforcement, you want to start having these conversations. And so the rest of this class is going to be the things that you can do to help you prepare to have these conversations, including writing scripts and thinking in advance about what the sentences might be that you might use. I'll try to go through it fairly quickly, but again, you might want to grab screenshots. So our ground rules are: number one, never have a conversation when you're triggered or feeling any degree of negative emotion, because the other person will feel attacked by your energy and they will either push back or withdraw, neither of which will get you to a good result, and both of which will make things worse. The next guideline is find a mutual purpose, what you both want. You're going to be able to have a conversation if you're both headed in the same direction. So that is something to think about before you have a boundaries or an accountability conversation. When you feel calm and have a lot of respect for the other person, curiously problem solve by discussing how both of your behaviors move you towards or away from your mutual purpose. So for example, if somebody yells at you, maybe the mutual purpose is we want to be heard by each other. Maybe the mutual purpose is we want to be able to discuss issues when we aren't working. And then you can go into how the yelling doesn't keep you engaged in the conversation because of your response to the yelling. If you have two people that don't have any problem with yelling, that may be the best way for them to discuss issues. They may just love yelling at each other, and then they work through their issues and they're both fine afterwards. So they may come from that type of a background. You don't know. The mutual purpose is real key because it gives you a frame for your conversation. Since you both want something, you can now discuss how both of your behaviors either get you closer to that thing you both want or take you away from the thing you both want. And that's where you're going to get your power. So what is our toolbox? Our toolbox is the things we need to have before we have a conversation, right? So number one, we have to know our top 3 rules. We have to be clear on what behaviors are not okay with us and what behaviors we would prefer to have happen instead. If we're not clear on that, then we're not going to be able to communicate anything clearly. You have to be clear in your head to be able to communicate something clearly. So any stories that you're telling yourself about how they should know, or if they loved me, they would, or if they respected me, that is not helping you. That's defeating you, because people cannot read your minds, and people engage in a wide variety of behaviors that have nothing to do with how much they love or respect you. In fact, most of other people's behaviors have nothing to do with you. So they don't do behaviors because of you or because of their feelings towards you. They usually engage in behaviors because of them. because of things that they're trying to accomplish, or problems they're trying to solve, or pain they're trying to avoid. But whatever the reason is, it's usually about them. And if it affects you negatively, it's usually because they're feeling some degree of stress and their behaviors are not very effective. And you're feeling that negative energy and the impact of the behavior as a result. So it's never about you. And one of the most powerful things that I've noticed from the people who have been going through this program is there's a real shift in their energy and their power around having these conversations when they stop taking the negative behavior personally. So, what do we believe is the driving force or need behind the negative behavior? That is another way of saying what's the positive intention behind the negative behavior? What's the goal they're trying to achieve? What's the problem they're trying to solve? What's the pain they're trying to avoid? Try to guess it. But think about if a good person did this behavior, what could it be? Instead of making up stories about how this person treats you bad because they're a bad person, or how this person treats you bad because they think you're a bad person, because those are just stories that your mind will make up. But your mind will make up those stories, but those stories are just stories, and they're not the truth, and they won't help you. They're things our mind does, and that's another class. That's the advanced growth class. All right, what do we both want? That's again the mutual purpose. What positive reinforcement options do we have? Now, this is really powerful because your positive reinforcement is going to have more of an effect on the behaviors that you want to encourage than consequences, negatively. Not negative reinforcement, but punishment. Punishment doesn't work as well as positive reinforcement. So if you have a choice, what you really want to be doing is, if you've got a shouter, for example, what you really want to be doing is positively reinforcing when they're speaking to you in a way that's calm, instead of negative, punishing or criticizing when they're speaking to you in the wrong way. So the more you can catch people doing things right and give them positive reinforcement for doing things right, the more effective you'll be at influencing them to increase that behavior. And number 6, what are the specific sentences we'll use in various situations? So what I mean by that is, what are the things that you're going to say? If you can prepare in advance, it's going to be a lot more effective. Now, it's interesting. I am jumping up and I'm thinking that maybe we didn't address number 2 here, which is, what is our spectrum of consequences that we can control? So you always have to take into consideration the fact that the person may not follow your boundaries, may not follow your rules, no matter how much you talk to them. And most people come into these classes in that situation. I've tried everything. They're not changing. I don't really know what I can do. And I really don't believe that they're going to respond to a conversation. And so you really have to think in terms of what are the consequences. But a spectrum of consequences is really important, because usually the consequence that you're thinking that you're going to have to resort to is your last resort. So if you're in a marriage, you may be thinking divorce, and you really don't want to do a divorce. You really don't want to, but that may have to be your last resort. When you're in a business, it might be firing someone. Again, you really don't want it to come to that. So the last thing in our spectrum of consequences is that thing where we don't want it to come to that. So now what we have to think about are 5 or 6 other options that are not as extreme, that we can begin to use as consequences to change the behavior, so that maybe we won't have to get to the last resort. So that's kind of our goal when we talk about the spectrum of consequences. And I'll give you some examples of this. All right, so your top 3 rules. I gave some examples here. We share the responsibility for keeping the house clean, maintained. We had a thing in our class where everyone was joking about, how do we make someone wash the dishes? So I have a lot of washing the dishes examples in here, but I have some other examples too. Some other examples of a clear rule. So your rules have to be clear. When you promise to complete a task by a certain time, you complete it by that time, or you let me know as soon as you run into a snag so I can adjust my expectation. Very clear. You either do exactly what you say, or if it looks like you're not going to be able to do what you said, you let me know immediately so I can readjust. Don't swear or make disparaging comments about other people. So that's a pretty clear rule. So there's some blanks here because I was thinking maybe you could use it as a worksheet and practice writing some rules down. All right, spectrum of consequences. So I made a spectrum of consequences for doing the dishes. I tried to keep an open mind based on, is this a spouse or is this a kid? And so, your consequences are obviously going to be different for each. But I guess in this example, I thought of it as a kid. So on your dishes days, I'll remind you once kindly if they're not done by 8. See, that's a really nice one. Now, the one at the very bottom is like your last resort. If you don't participate in cleanup, I'll no longer cook for you. You won't be allowed to leave the house. Whatever that final consequence is, that's not going to be an easy one for you to instigate. So if it's completely easy to do, I'll no longer cook for you, then maybe that goes higher on the list. If it's completely easy to say you're not allowed to leave the house because you didn't do your chores, then that may go up higher on the list. But the thing you want at number 4 or number 5, if you have 5 of them, is the thing that you feel like you might have to resort to, but you really aren't going to want to. And then the other ones are things that are really easy. So it's really easy for me to remind somebody once if they haven't done it, right? If they're not done by 8, I may or may not do the dishes if the mess is bothering me. So I'm not going to sit there and make myself not do the dishes if they drive me nuts. Just be sitting down there and I just can't tolerate them not being done. If it's easy for me to leave the dishes, then that's the next thing. I leave the dishes and then you don't get to do anything tomorrow until they're done. But I may not want to leave the dishes. I may want them clean. So maybe I say, you know what, if they're not done by done, then 8, then you just didn't do them. And now we're going to have a conversation about how you didn't follow through on your promise. If you're willing to negotiate and follow through by doing other chores or helping in other ways that achieve our shared purpose, whatever the shared purpose is. So let's say it's keeping the house clean, or maybe it's sharing in the household responsibilities, or maybe it's just having a happy household. I'll be flexible on the dishes, but I'll need you to rinse them and bring them in after eating. So sometimes we get into power struggles, and the power struggles get so ugly that it's almost better to let go of that one thing. So I had that happen with my daughter, and luckily she told me about it. So I was able to kind of realize I was on a power struggle and then try to think about how to change. And the power struggle was her cleaning her room. And I used to go in and wrinkle my nose and talk about how gross her room was because when it was dirty. And I mean, she felt obviously very judged by that and insulted by that. And it just made her mad. And so she wasn't going to clean. And luckily, she was able to give me feedback on the negative energy that I was emitting towards her and how it was affecting her. And so once I became aware of that, I was able to sort of shift my tactic and let go of the room cleaning. And what I said is, I've seen you clean your room. I know you're good at it. I know you love it when your room is clean. So I'll let go of that and let you own that. And I'll even help you sometimes if you ask me for help. But what really matters to me, and this is the key here, what really matters to you. So if you've got caught in a power struggle, what really matters to you? What really matters to me is I don't want you to have dishes up here that have been used and have hardened food on them because they're an issue with bugs, attracting bugs. And because when they finally do get down, it's almost impossible for me to get the food off. So really honing in on what does matter, explaining the reasons why, I was able to enter into a new phase with my daughter where she did clean her room, not as often as I wanted, but she cleaned it once every 2 to 4 weeks. So once a month or once every sometimes twice a month, she would clean her room, and she got better with the dishes. She didn't always. Sometimes dishes with ice cream and hard food got stacked up in her room as before, but the behavior improved. And for the most part, she was bringing down the dishes and rinsing them out because she understood how I felt. And I kept my part of the bargain, which was to stop giving her that negative, judgmental, self-righteous energy and judging her about it. And instead, I really believed that she loved having a clean room. And I believed in her. And, for the most part, she's gotten more and more clean as she's gotten older and more organized, because that is who she really is and that is what she cares about. But when somebody's judging you, you will often do the exact opposite, even if you want to do the same thing. So if you're overweight and somebody's making snarky comments about your weight, that might be one of the big triggers that makes you not go on a diet because you feel so judged. If you're in a spouse relationship and someone makes a snarky comment about how you shower too long or something and you waste all the water, then maybe the next time you shower, you're just going to feel like, you know what, I get to shower our sense of autonomy and freedom kicks in. I'll shower as long as I want. Don't judge me. We hate being judged. And so we'll have a little rebellious streak that sometimes makes us do the opposite. I'll talk a little bit more about power struggles in a second, but this does happen a lot. So that's why I have number 3 here. If you're willing to negotiate, if dishes has become such a power struggle, you might want to solicit some of their ideas. And as long as they're willing to do, 5 other chores instead of the dishes, then maybe you'll do the dishes all the time as long as they follow through on that. And then eventually you get to your last resort option. Okay, so that's your spectrum of consequences. You should know that in advance of having a conversation. That doesn't mean that you tell them what the spectrum of consequences are. So that's another thing. You may or may not decide to tell them what the consequences are. It depends on the situation. So when I say, if you don't do the dishes, I'll remind you once by 8 p.m., you might not tell them I'll remind you at 8 p.m. Maybe that's a guideline for you. So you now have that guideline of how you're going to walk through the consequences if they don't behave. Its whole purpose is to kind of settle you down, because what really changes the behavior is you not being triggered by it. And when you're not triggered by it, then you can have the conversation. So it's really the two things coupled: you not being triggered and you being really clear about what you want, and then having the conversation about it. All right. Possible positive intentions. So here's just a list of questions you can ask yourself. What do you think they're trying to achieve through their behavior? What problem are they trying to solve? What pain are they trying to avoid? What matters to them most? What are their unmet needs? What are their top saboteurs? Kind of knowing how they behave when they're stressed or hijacked, knowing kind of what matters to them really helps you, because that's going to help you find a mutual purpose. I had this conversation with my daughter, and it was about her bringing her friends over, like kind of by surprise after school, and the house wouldn't be very clean, and I'd be really embarrassed. And I had this conversation with her, and she's like, "Oh, my friends don't care, and I don't care." So I couldn't have said, "We both want to have a clean house when company comes over," right? Because to me, that was a clear purpose. But to her, whatever, my friends don't care, I don't care, we're just having fun together, we don't care what the house looks like. Mom, you should see what some of their houses look like. But that didn't convince me. But then I had to elevate it, right? Okay, well, you don't care if the house is clean or not, but do you care if your mom is agitated? Well, yeah, I really would rather you not be agitated, Mom. I'd really rather have you be happy. Well, listen, if there are people over that are not the 4 of us that live in this house, and the house isn't to a certain standard, I'm going to get agitated. I'm going to get upset. I'm going to get embarrassed. And I may not try to take it out on you, but I probably will end up taking it out on you. So you're going to have to deal with an upset mom. But if you help me clean the house or keep the house clean, you can have your friends over anytime you want. And what you want is to have your friends over anytime you want. What I want is a clean house. So let's see if we can work together. So it really becomes just a problem solving conversation when nobody's triggered and we're really clear on what is it we both want, and what are the behaviors, and how are the behaviors either moving us towards what we both want or against what we both want. But we need to know what we both want. So these questions kind of help you think about what the other person might be wanting. Okay, so positive reinforcement. It's often important to think about what is the positive reinforcement. So instead of just getting mad at somebody for not helping around the house or doing chores, one thing that you can do is think of a brainstorm list based on what you know they like, and think about doing that. So if this would be fun, maybe a great positive reinforcement is when you have somebody help with the dishes, maybe you do it together and you have music on and you're dancing while you're washing dishes together, and it's really fun. And that could be positive reinforcement for people. What I do with my husband a lot, because he washes the dishes a lot, is I hug him and I tell him that I notice that he's washing the dishes. I notice he's doing it way more than me. I really appreciate it. And I feel really lucky to have him. And I say that every single time I notice, because I know that if I didn't notice, we could easily spiral down into him being resentful. But it used to be that neither of us would do dishes, or I would do it all, or whatever. I mean, things you can really modify someone's behavior with appreciation. For a family, it might be a movie or a game together. So everybody works together, then everybody plays together. So that's really fun for some families. Excuse me. For people who are more introverted, like me, it might be quiet time and more freedom, after everything's cleaned up. So instead of everyone coming together for a game, maybe what everybody wants to come together for, I'm going to stop the record for just a second so I can cough without annoying you. All right, excuse that interruption and thank you. I had cough and I realized I could pause the recording. So, anyway, for some people, it might be the husband gets to hang out and watch television, the wife gets to go up and have a bubble bath or something. So, we each get our own quiet, relaxed time after the chores are done. But just think about, what does the other person most enjoy? And if you think about it in a more positive way, and then you get your creative juices flowing, and you get out of that resentment over it. I think the resentment comes from the sense of hopelessness that I'm never going to be able to get them to change behavior. But the behavior actually becomes less likely to change the more resentful you are, the more angry you are, the more self-righteous you feel about it. So really making this internal shift of not taking it personally and getting into a positive space gives you tons of power when it comes to changing somebody else's behavior. Okay, note on power struggles. So I already talked quite a bit about power struggles, but if you want to do a print screen here, and I'll just share what I have written. You're in a power struggle when you've made their behavior or absence of behavior mean more than just the behavior. And this is what I see all the time in coaching. So if they don't help with the dishes, they disrespect me. They're lazy. They don't care about the house. They don't respect this family. If they snap at me, they're rude and disrespectful. If they don't bring me flowers, they don't love me. So anything around they're bad or they have bad intentions when they do this behavior, that means you've made the behavior mean something about who they are as a person. Once you're in that cognitive trap, nothing you do will help the problem, help change the behavior. And that, unfortunately, when people come to me and ask about how to set boundaries or how to change things in the relationship, they're usually already down this road where they're in a power struggle. So you really have to shift the way you think about things before you can successfully change the things. And that requires some personal inner work, right? Cognitive attributions, they're very common and documented in neuroscience as common cognitive biases. And we've talked about it a lot in this program, that when someone does a behavior that affects us negatively, we tend to think it's about us, and we tend to think that they intend to hurt us and have a negative impact on us. And because we jump to that conclusion, we turn them into an enemy, and we turn them into an object, and we think it's okay. We justify talking down to them and making snarky comments like, well, if you did the dishes more, then maybe you'd know that you need to, wash the food off before you put it in the dishwasher. Those kind of comments are condescending and rude and hurtful, and we think we're the ones that are the victims in the situation because we're not being treated right, but just by the way we're interacting, we're really hurting the other parties. So it's really important to notice when you're in a power struggle. What it feels like when you're in a power struggle is you're really honed in and triggered by whether they're doing or not doing a certain behavior. And every time you talk to them about it, it's like they do the opposite, or they get defensive, or they push back on you. So when you're in a power struggle, you might have to let go completely of the behavior you've honed in on just to get past the problem. So for example, if it's the dishes, you might have to just let go of the dishes. And I think I already shared the story of where I let go of the clean room with my daughter, and then that slowly changed. So sometimes you have to think about what really matters, and you have to be able to talk about it without being triggered. And then sometimes you just have to negotiate if it's something that matters so much that you can't let go of it. Okay, the sentence builder. What is the mutual purpose? What do we both want? What behavior are we requesting? How does the behavior we're requesting get us to our mutual purpose? That's important. You need to know what the impact of the behaviors you want are. How does a negative behavior prevent us from reaching our mutual purpose? If you're not triggered, you can always be kind and patient, yet clear when conveying the feedback. So the key is to not be triggered and have the conversation when you're not triggered. After repeated violations, negative behavior becomes pattern of behavior, and in addition to preventing us from reaching mutual purpose, we can also talk about how it damages our relationship. So, again, we think about this as a process of behavior change, of facilitating a behavior change. And so we have to expect that it's not going to be perfect, and we have to think ahead. So we don't think one conversation is going to change everything. I just have to get the energy up to have this conversation right, and then everything's going to change. No, that's not how it's going to work. So don't worry about trying to have the conversation right. Just do the best you can. Have a conversation, see what happens, have another conversation, but plan that you're going to have a few conversations about this and that you're going to have those conversations when you're called. Okay, we have some example sentences here. I guess I will read them to you in case you don't feel like cutting and pasting. We have systems and processes in place that are designed to provide the best quality products and services for our customers, which you and I both stand for, right? However, if I continue to make time-consuming exceptions for your customers, it will affect our whole system of quality control and actually decrease our quality and responsiveness overall. On the other hand, if you follow our processes for most situations, then we can discuss as a team when it's appropriate for us to make exceptions. So this is, I'm imagining you're in manufacturing and a salesperson keeps asking you to change the product design or change something about the product for their particular customer in the name of customer service or something like that. Here we're back to the dishes. We both want to relax and enjoy our evenings, right? I'm fine with you watching television, but if you do it while the dishes are still piled up, I get resentful. What if we committed to washing the dishes together and getting the trash out each night, and then each of us getting a couple of hours to completely relax? So again, those are a couple of examples. I think I have some more examples coming up. So the components of the sentences that you really need to get clear on is what we both want, what the behavior is you want them to change, the impact on you, which you have to own, the positive intention, and then the request. So I have them kind of sitting up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's kind of your script worksheet. So we both want X, right? Well, when you do this, I feel this. I'm sure you didn't mean it in a negative way. Would you be willing to? Or do you have other ideas that would work? So sometimes engaging them in a conversation where your proposed solution doesn't have to be the only solution can get an even better result. So an example, we both want to be able to talk through things that bother us, right? When you yell, I get scared and I shut down. I can't even think and stay in the conversation. I'm sure you're not trying to scare me. It's just the way that anger affects me. Would you be willing to wait until you're calm to discuss issues? Or would you be willing to tell me what triggers you in those situations? So why do you get so angry? I remember having a conversation with my husband where I said to him, this was when I first learned about boundaries, so it was a long, long time ago, but he used to get defensive or frustrated and he used to, express his frustration by yelling. And I remember once saying to him, I never mean to judge you or attack you. So I know that sometimes it seems that that's what I'm doing, but I want you to know right now that that's not my intention. And so please give me the benefit of the doubt and don't yell at me. Just ask me or just tell me how what I said affected you. So what was happening is I would make a remark about something in the house that we needed to do. And I was thinking, we need to put this on our to-do list. And he was thinking, she's judging me for not having already taken care of this. And so he would get defensive. And so we never even got to a point of having a real conversation about it because I would make the remark, he would start getting defensive. I would start shutting down because he was yelling and getting really self-righteous about why is this rude person yelling at me? And we never had the right conversation, which is how do we talk together about things we want to do in the house? Because I never knew that when I was pointing something out, he was taking it as a judgment. But we were finally able to get there when I asked him to give me the benefit of the doubt. So again, just having these conversations without reacting. And when I asked him that, I wasn't reacting. I was calm. I just said, if I'm triggering you right now, if what I just said upset you, I didn't mean it as an attack. I didn't mean it as a judgment. And him hearing those words from me helps him go, okay, she's telling me she's not judging me. So even though what she just said felt like a judgment, she's now telling me that she didn't mean to judge me. So, okay, I'll take that as an apology. And now I can tell her why her tone of voice was really snarky and she doesn't even realize it. So let's see. Back to a dishes example. We both want to enjoy living here, right? This is when they don't care about the dishes. When I see chores or dishes that need to be done and you don't help, I feel unappreciated and taken advantage of. I'm guessing you're preoccupied with other things and you might not even notice, but I start getting resentful and angry. I turn into nagging and mean mom or nagging and mean spouse, which I'm sure isn't any more enjoyable for you than it is for me. I would be much happier if I had a clean house in the evening to relax. Would you be willing to do the dishes when I cook, or do you have other ideas of how after dinner we can get everything cleaned up together and then we can go both relax? Okay, it looks like that is the last slide. That was a long bunch of stuff, but I've heard from people that it's really, really helpful in terms of thinking through it. So I wanted to put it on video for you so that you would have it available to you. And I guess what I'd like you to do as a homework assignment is just think through it using these tools, think through some scripts or things that you might say. And then next time in our class, we'll talk about where you're stuck. All right, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.